Attention. Attention, we have an announcement.
Class.
Okay, so I just want to review who's going to come so we can be respectful of the place's space because I reserved 25 seats. I heard from John. I heard from Chris who can come, Hunter, Megan, Tammy. Is there anybody else that is planning to come? It's on Saturday from 12 to 3. Okay.
Should we all just raise our hands? Raise your hands if you're going.
Because I know some people put it on Facebook, and then some people told me that they couldn't, like things had come up or changed. But I just want to get, are we 10 or under?
Should we just all raise our hands, I think?
Well, because there's some online.
You on video? Can you raise your hands, please?
Yeah.
Okay, so
I see you there. Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's some people with 5.
John Andrews, he's coming. I saw him.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
I'll change it to about 10 in the reservation.
The DeBudios, Amy, DeFranks, are you coming? No? I can't tell. I got nothing. All right. They have no idea what we're talking about because they didn't hear a word Don just said. What are they doing? So strange. I ain't late. I want proof. Where's your stuff, Hunter? Stuff's there. Dang it. All right. Yep. Your bathroom needs are not important to me, Hunter. You guys are a mess. Mess. All right. Okay. So I think we're still light. Who are we missing? Dan is there. Robert.
Also, Megan's sick too.
I got Megan's from Mark. All right. Cool. I got a feeling. All right. Well, shall we? Are we ready? Are you getting caffeinated? Trying to. Let's get started. Let's do Proverbs 22. Last verse of Proverbs 22. This one always reminds me of Joseph, and I think it's just good to, I don't know, it's good for us, good to just to remember how God tends to exalt those that men are faithful in some cool ways. So 22:29, somebody read that. 22:29.
Do you see a man skilled in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men.
I mean, obviously, I think just points to so many life qualities of Joseph. Do you see a man skilled in his work, right? As we've watched the life of Joseph unfold, we've seen a guy that has a certain skill set on earth, right? Not necessarily spiritual gifts, but physical giftings that God has blessed him with. We see that early on, right, as he's the youngest of all the sons and yet put in charge of the family business, if you will, as the administrator. And you see the end result of those giftings played out over decades. He will stand before kings. So God took this quality in this man who was faithful and diligent to do what God had blessed him to do in a very earthly sense. And he doesn't ultimately, end of verse 29, stand before obscure men. It begs the question for us. We obviously talk about, in the New Testament sense, our spiritual gifts and those things, and that's obviously of great importance, but do you know what you're good at? Have you come to the place in your life where you understand this is who I am, this is who I am not, right? I'm not trying to be this because I think it would be cool, or to have this job, or whatever it may be in a skill set that isn't you. Do you know what you're good at? And do you know what you're not good at? And generally, the list of things that you're good at is going to be much shorter than the list of things you're bad at, right? And one of the ways that you get there is to figure out all the things you're not good at before you figure out the things that you are good at, like natural temperaments and things that come to you that way. John Maxwell, who's kind of a leadership guru in some of the Christian circles, would say, for most people, it takes like 30 years to figure that out, like just your natural gifting. And as I look at my kind of timeline and figuring out my gifting and where my sweet spot was within my own life, it probably took the better part of 30 plus years to figure out, okay, this is where I fly at the highest altitude. This is where I'm most gifted. And there were times that I wanted to be in that field or that field, and it just wasn't who I was. And I would look at it and admire folks that were, and just came to some realizations like, man, that's not how God's wired me. That's not who I am. So as you guys think about your life, more than likely figuring that out, if you haven't already, for those of you that are in that 30 and under category, it's going to take you time to do that, okay? It's also going to take you failure, repeated failure to figure out what that is, okay? And don't be discouraged by that. It's one of the hardest conversations we're having with our oldest daughter. Like, she wants to get to this place in life where she figures everything out without failure. Life doesn't work that way, right? Failure is a great thing when you learn from it and you realize, okay, like, man, that fell apart. I got put in charge of that, and that was awful, right? I learned very quickly I am not an event planner. I cannot do events. And I have a job in my nonprofit world that is sometimes event heavy. Well, I am awful at planning events. It's just not how I'm wired, right? And I had to fail a couple times to realize I need to find someone around me that's more gifted at those things if we're going to do a lot of events, because that's not, I don't think that way. There's just too many boxes to check and too many details that I just am not wired that way, right? So you're going to have to fail multiple times to figure out what ultimately it is that God wants you to do, okay? And embrace that process. Maxwell would then say it really takes you the next 30 years of your life to kind of lean into that, to be comfortable with that, to learn that, okay, this is who I am, and to develop that craft over the next season of your life. So, and then he's got to last 30 years. I forget what it is if he lived to 90. Anyway, so. Yeah, he's still alive, so he's crushing it. So, yeah. We're all going to die at 60 because I can't remember the last 30. So, yeah. No. Yeah. John Maxwell? Oh, yeah.
No, but like how?
Oh, for sure.
What is his, like,
He's grandfather age, yeah. Like, John Maxwell? He's got to be 70s easily.
okay. I figured he
Yeah,
would.
careful. Those ages to me are like not that old anymore, right? Like, yeah. Take it easy, Hunter. I turned 42 this month, man. Back it down. Yeah. 72? 70.
You turn your time.
The 20th.
How do you know that?
My niece's birthday's the 19th. I remember people's birthdays.
That's impressive, man. Don, you're in charge of all off-the-fronts events. Details. Good, done. You just got hired. I don't pay you a dime, but you're in charge.
I can tell you everybody's birthday in my family and anniversary.
Dang. That is a gift. I can remember my wife's birthday, our anniversary, and most of the time, all three of my kids' birthdays. Most of the time. I got the ages are easy. The birthdays are like
Like the month and the day?
in the year.
Are you kidding me?
The year's the part that I'm like,
What you have to do is associate it with something in your life that happened. Like the birth of your child.
what I need is a dawn to write them in my calendar, so I don't need to know these things. So, anyway, we got off track here. Squirrel. So, think through that in your world, guys. There is nothing more satisfying, I think, than working in the area of your giftingness. There's nothing more frustrating than working in an area where you didn't. You know, I hung clothing in a women's clothing store. I unboxed women's clothing for about a lot longer than I should have before I got fired because I was so bad at it, and I hated that job, but it paid the bills for a while. But I quickly learned this is not my gifting either. I hate this, but it was developmental in the process that all that you see before you now, right? It was not fun, but those were things that you'll learn along the way, right? We all have jobs that we don't particularly love and such, but they build to certain things. So I very quickly learned that is not where I want to make my career and living, and God, I will if you make me, but please don't. So as you guys think through that, we're going to see the culmination of a story today as we focus back on Joseph and more now towards the administration of all of Egypt and what he's doing underneath Pharaoh. It is mind-blowing what he does. So thoughts on that before we head back into Genesis 45.
Parents, expose your kids. Don't shelter them. Let them fail and get
Yeah.
out there and expose them. 'Cause
Yeah.
That's the only way you figure it out, right?
Man, that's
To
well
go
said.
Find what you're good at.
Yeah.
As kids, I had two other brothers, and we constantly were breaking stuff, and stuff was,
Hmm.
But that's how we figured out
Yeah.
what we like to do
Yeah.
with our
Absolutely.
Don't shelter your kids.
That's so good.
Push them out there.
Yeah, make them fail,
Go
right?
try.
Yeah, absolutely. Who is it? Robert, pastor at not Faith Bible Church, Fellowship Bible Church, Little Rock. Robert, it'll come to me in a second. Anyway, he said kids need to hear a number of things. I love you, I'm proud of you, and you're good at. They need to hear that from their parents, like specifics. You're great at drawing. You're great at whatever it may be, as simple as it could be, right? You're a great soccer player. You're a great whatever. Like they need to hear a tangible thing that differentiates them from the rest of their siblings. I see a gifting in you here. I think you're great at this, right? Kids need that from their parents. It gives them a sense of direction and like, okay, like I see this in you, right? Joseph obviously saw that. His dad saw that, encouraged that, and did it, right? Now, the other brothers, maybe not so much, but you're good at being a bump on the log. You know, Issachar, you sit and stay. I don't know, but I'm teasing. But there's others that maybe not so much. So yeah, that's a good word. Give your kids opportunities to fail.
Yeah, one thing I think is bad is when sometimes you have like kids in high school and they'll ask about what they want to do, like college and things. The thing that's bad about school is that it's kind of the opposite of that. It tells you to sort of cover everything.
Yeah.
And, like, yeah, that's kind of the way colleges are designed.
Uh-huh.
Accept you and stuff.
Uh-huh.
Which is, you just kind of designed to not look for
Yeah.
some interest and not set stuff
A
aside.
generalist,
Not
right?
just be good at
Yep.
all of it, and that's how you get.
It's like you were sitting at our dinner table last night, Jay. My kid's like, when am I ever going to use this again? I'm like, if you're an engineer or if you're an architect, you're going to need advanced level math. Aside from that, you will never need any of that again. Like pretty much 7th or 8th grade, like you're done. Like, you know, I use some geometry, I use some algebra, but teaching the Bible, there's not a lot of that, you know. Building bikes, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, like, okay, that's, okay, got it.
The other problem is it's designed to have you do well a lot, whereas like in sports and stuff, you learn to fail
Yeah,
like a lot.
yep,
And that's
yep.
something else.
It's the beauty of team sports, right? Teach you the value of failure.
Math that helps you really think more than just actually applying the concepts. It pushes
Absolutely.
your brain to think in a different way.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. There's great value to it, but there's certainly a sense that we are learning to be generalists and not specialists in some ways. So, and you miss the opportunity. And if you're someone that isn't that way, and you wanna build tables, like where do you get that, right? There's so many places that don't. We don't have wood shop like we had when I grew up anymore. Those are failing industries, unfortunately. So, anyway, all right, back to Genesis, shall we? All right. Isaiah, will you pray for us this morning as we jump back into chapter 45? Thank you, sir.
Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you and praise you for another day, another opportunity, Lord. We ask that we continue to dive in your word, continue to reveal things to us that we may apply in our lives and bring you glory. We ask for wisdom and understanding. Pray a special prayer of our teachers, Mike and Shay. We give you all praise and glory and honor. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
All right. So we are, Lord willing, we're going to finish our first book of the Bible today. We're going to finish Genesis, I think. So we will rise up and celebrate. Shay's in book 3 right now. You guys are like a third of the way through Romans, quarter of the way through Romans. Anyway, so we may finish today. No promises, but that's the hope. So as we are now kind of in the tail end of Joseph's life, we've seen this beautiful picture. Gosh, if there was ever a movie that I would love to see made by someone that wouldn't screw it up, right, in the Old Testament, this is the narrative that I would love to see played out on the big screen, right? It's just such an amazing story of failure, of redemption, of struggle. So cool, right? And we saw what I would call really the climax of that entire story in chapter 45 last week when we saw Joseph finally reveal himself to his brothers. He had orchestrated this grand plan, right, of creating, basically recreating the scene that was his life some 2 decades prior to that, and put his brothers in the situation to really find out, man, are they still favoring, or is dad still favoring the youngest brother, and would they sell out the youngest brother again? So he keeps Simeon in jail. When they come to him, send the rest home with enough food to eat for a season, and then dad says, man, go get more. And obviously you guys know the story of, hey, don't We can't go back without Benjamin. They bring Benjamin back, and again, Joseph just is the marionette master playing the strings of his brothers, and we see finally at the end of chapter 44 the highlight of Judah when he steps up and says, man, Benjamin's guilty. He's the one that stole the cup from your sack that was planted in there by Joseph, and he says, I will take his place. I will be a penal substitution for him. He goes free. I will incur the wrath that is supposed to be on him, and that'll be my punishment. And in chapter 44, the end of chapter 44, Joseph sees that his brothers are different. They have changed, and this process that they have been walked through has changed their life. So 45 and following, we see for the first time then Joseph in verse 2 sees his brothers for the first time in a real, true sense in that light, and they also see him for who he is. Really, Joseph reveals himself to them and says, I am Joseph, right? I'm your brother whom you sold into Egypt. And that's kind of where we finished last week, 45, verses 5 and 6 we saw, okay? Now, after this revealing, we're going to see kind of the hugs and all that. We saw a bit of that last week, right? Verse 6, we see that the famine is still 5 more years to go in the land. They're 2 years into the 7-year famine, so it's getting worse, and he's got to provide for his family, right? God in verse 7, or Joseph in verse 7, it explains kind of why God put him here. Somebody pick up there in 45:7, and we'll see this verse mirrored in chapter 50 as well. 45:7. Mm-hmm. Do we go all the way through 14? Okay. Well, then you get more review. Great. Then we'll skip all that. I had 6 in my deal, so I probably told Shay wrong. Anyway, so you see all this. You see the idea that they're going to live in the land of Goshen, right? Did we talk about that? Where's Goshen? Anybody know? Not that one. Not the street over my neighborhood. Not that one either. It is east of the Nile, okay? So it is in the eastern part of Egypt. I'll show you guys a map later. But the idea is Joseph already has in mind, again, the administrator that is Joseph, he's already figured this out. So he's going to bring his brothers into the land with their families, with their dad, and they're going to live in Egypt. But you're going to see how he's going to set them up. So as you see clues of where they're going to be, he's going to have them live in this land of Goshen. We'll find out more about that land and why that land here in a bit, okay? But verse 10, you shall be near me, your children, you and your children, your children's children, and all the flocks and herds that you have. Literally, we're going to uproot from Canaan. We're going to move the entire family and all our stuff into Egypt. This is going to be similar to Abraham leaving Haran, or to rather. We're going to uproot everything, okay? 14, we see again this reuniting between Benjamin and Joseph, the 2 full-blood brothers. They weep together. They talk together. Now, verse 16, Amanda, how about that? Let's pick up there.
Now when the news was heard in Pharaoh's house that Joseph's brothers had come, it pleased Pharaoh and his servants.
Now, think about Proverbs 22:29 when you think about what's about to occur here. Keep going.
Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, take to your brothers, do this, load your beasts, and go to the land of Canaan, and take your father and your household, and come to me. And I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you will eat the fat of the land. Now you are ordered, do this, take wagons from the land of Egypt for your little ones, and for your wives, and bring your father and come. Do not concern yourselves with your goods, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours.
Man, so what does Pharaoh just do for Joseph and his family? Hooks him up, right? Did Joseph ask for any of that? No. Why is that given to Joseph and his family? Because Joseph is faithful. And you're going to see how faithful here in a moment, what he's been doing for Pharaoh. But he is an amazing second-hand guy, if you will, second in charge, second chair leadership, if you will. And Pharaoh respects him. He honors him and his family and says, man, because of you're going to live in the backwash, if you will, the jet stream of Joseph. Because of the wake that he has left, you're going to enjoy the blessings of this one guy because I so respect him and what he's done. He says, bring your family. In fact, I'm going to send wagons. I'm going to send provisions. Don't worry about your stuff. Just bring you, the clothes that are on your back. You're going to live in the fattest part of the land. The best of the land is going to be yours. Just go home and get him. And he is blessed with this entourage. So 20 through 20, we see Pharaoh, again, just hook up the family, okay? The sons of Israel, verse 21, did so. Joseph gave them wagons according to the command of Pharaoh, gave them provisions for the journey. To each of them he gave changes of garments, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of garments. So takes care of his blood brother, knowing that the favoritism in the family is no longer a sting, if you will, and that he's safe, but blesses his younger brother, okay? To his father, verse 23, he sent as follows: 10 donkeys loaded with the best things of Egypt, 10 female donkeys loaded with grain and bread and sustenance for his father on the journey. Now, the back part of it we get, grain, bread, sustenance for the journey, meaning to get back to Egypt. He sends all this stuff. What would be the purpose of the donkeys loaded with the best things of Egypt? Why would he say that? Yeah, proof, right? These brothers are about to go home and say what?
Joseph.
Oh, by the way, this lie that we've been living for almost 20 years is a big farce. Joseph's actually alive. What, right? How do we know these things? So he's sending it's like a dowry almost. It's like it's proof of like, here's Eleazar coming to get a bride for Isaac, and to show that my master actually has, there's actually money in his bank account. Here's some stuff to prove that he is who he says he is. Here's some rings, here's some bracelets, whatever. He's sending all the best things of Egypt to say, this is legit. Joseph's alive, and here are all the things that he has to offer, right? And now, Jacob is going to be still a little bit like, what's going on here, right? As you can imagine, after he's spent the better part of his later fatherhood, if you will, believing that his second to youngest son is dead. So there had to be some odd conversations that happened on this journey. Yeah,
What's the significance of 10?
I don't know. Ask Luke. He's a full-time pastor. Yeah, no idea. Sorry, Luke. He taught this at church. He knows it. Exactly. All right. So I don't know. That's a good question. I'll check with people smarter than me on Logos and see if they have the answer. So I will look. Now, verse 24. Notice what he says to his brothers.
So he sent his brothers away, and as they departed, he said to them, "Do not quarrel on this journey."
Why would he remind them of that? Don't quarrel on the journey.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
We're good. What do you think their tendency would be when Joseph's now gone? What do you think Reuben's doing? I told you guys, man, I told you this would happen. I told you not to, right? You can just see the bickering amongst brothers that would begin to occur. And he's saying, hey, we're good. It's over. You're forgiven. Don't you guys bicker about it. And you're going to see, by the way, these brothers still do not have a full understanding of grace the way that Joseph is showing them. Their sin was so great, right? This lie that they've been living in, the deception of their hearts, their wickedness, they have a hard time understanding how Joseph can be so magnanimous, so forgiving, so like it's over, not wanting to repay evil for evil or to have like a pound of flesh in this. Joseph doesn't want any of that. So again, you see this picture of the pureness of the heart of the Father, if you will, through Joseph. But these guys can't fully wrap their minds around it. So there's even baggage that's coming for them later when we're going to see they can't quite assimilate the grace that's been given to them. Okay, and they'll have to be reassured, even post their moment of salvation, if you will, that hey, you're good, we're okay. God's grace has covered all of that. So don't bicker on the way home. They went from, in verse 25, Egypt to the land of Canaan, to their father Joseph. Now imagine this. Then they told him, saying, Joseph is still alive. It just so happens, Dad. And indeed, he is ruler over all the land of Egypt. How do you think Jacob took that? Like, I'm sorry, what? Like, Joseph who? My son Joseph? I mean, this had to be earth-shattering, right? He was stunned, for he did not believe them. I mean, you can imagine how hard it would be for Jacob to wrap his mind around the fact, A, that his son's alive, and B, that this dream that, remember, Joseph shared with Joseph, and Jacob, it said in the text, took note of it. Like, these pieces are beginning to come together for him, and he's not all the way there yet, right? When they told him in verse 27, all the words of Joseph that he had spoken to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to him, to carry him, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. Then Israel said, "It is enough. My son Joseph is alive. I will go down and see him before I die." So he realizes, man, this is my last hurrah. We're going to Egypt. We're up planning everything, and I'm going to get to go see my son before I die. So cool. Now, kind of climax to the story. I can imagine how difficult those conversations were between dad and son, between Reuben and father. Like, they've been lying to their dad for a long season, and this hasn't been once or twice. This has been a lifestyle, and these brothers had to come to grips with that. So tough, but it sounds like at the end of it all, Joseph says, "Man, it's enough. We're good." Jacob, rather, and let's move on. Okay, 46:1 now. How would you be feeling, by the way, if you're Jacob and you just got told you're going to take everything, you're going to leave the land of Canaan, who Abraham and Isaac have fought so diligently for, to have a grip in the land, and now you're going to uproot your family and take them to Egypt? Your grandfather went there, and he got sent home with his tail between his legs. He picked up Hagar on the way. He got scolded. Isaac went there. God told him, "Don't," right? And stay here during the famine of the land. How are you feeling right now if you're Jacob? Like, am I being disobedient right now? Is this what God wants from me? Like, this is the land that God has for us, clearly. So, 46 and following, I think God's aware of that. 46:1, let's pick up there and see how God responds.
So Israel set out with all that he had and came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. God spoke to Israel in visions of the night and said, "Jacob, Jacob." And he said, "Here I am." He said, "I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you a great nation there. I will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also surely bring you up again, and Joseph will close your eyes."
Don't be afraid. This is my plan. This is my will for you. You're going to see your son. What does it mean that he will close your eyes? And he's going to bury you. You're going to die, and he's going to be sitting at your side. He will close your eyes. I will make you a great nation down there. This is my will. Right now, we know the story of Israel and Egypt, and it is not a great story. It's 40 years of one nation being slaves to another. Israel spent 40 or 400 years in servitude of Egypt. But in the process, God's going to do his purpose. He is going to make them a great nation. Yeah.
I've heard people before who have referenced, I don't know, I assume it's out of context when they say, "I will surely bring you up again," as a resurrection thing instead of going back to the promised land.
Yeah, I think up is back into the land. Yeah, so I'm not done with the covenant. We're not shutting the door on Canaan. You're going to come back up. Yes, and you're going to see that Jacob still has a claim to that. When he finally is getting ready to die, he's like, "Don't you dare bury me in this pagan land. You bring my body back and you bury me in the cave of Machpelah." I mean, he's very clear. So he definitely, I think God foresaw this sense of maybe fear and trepidation in him of, man, he's leaving and this isn't what would honor God, especially to Egypt, which has got a lot of backstories, as we mentioned. So yeah, I think that going up is, "I'll bring you back. Don't worry about it." Now, it's going to be 400 plus years before he does that, but he and the rest of the nation ultimately come back. Okay, verse 4, we see that again. Joseph will close your eyes. Joseph arose, verse 5, goes from there Beersheba with the wagons, with their little ones, wives, everything they have. Verse 6, they took their livestock, their property, all that they had acquired in the land of Canaan, and came to Egypt. Joseph and all his descendants with him. They take everything. Verse 7, sons, grandsons, daughters, granddaughters, all his descendants were brought with him to Egypt. This is not a weekend trip. This isn't pack a duffel. This is take everything. We are leaving. So this is a very permanent move, if you will. Verses 8 and following, all the way through verse 27, is a list of everybody that goes. Every son of Jacob and daughter, Dinah, as well as all of their sons or daughters. Okay, so we won't read them all, but just to give you kind of a highlight of what this looks like. The names of the sons of Israel in verse 8, Jacob and his sons who went to Egypt. Firstborn, Reuben, who was Jacob's firstborn. The sons of Reuben, you get there in verse 9, 4 names that are mentioned. Hanok, Palu, Herzon, and Carmi. And again, this is going to be the flow of every kid. Simeon in verse 10 and his children. Sons of Levi, verse 11, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. All the family is mentioned. Okay, so you're getting a list of everybody that goes. Now, in verse 26, we get the total of every person that comes from the land of Canaan now into Egypt. Somebody read that in verse 26.
All the persons belonging to Jacob who came to Egypt, his direct descendants, not including the wives of Jacob's sons, were 66 persons in all, and the sons of Joseph who were born to him in Egypt were 2. All the persons of the house of Jacob who came to Egypt were 70.
All right. This is the family of God. We have 70 people from Jacob and his direct descendants. Okay, so you get 66 with Jacob, all his sons, all their sons, and all their grandsons, right? Not including the wives yet. And then you take, you get Jacob, then you get Joseph, and then you get Joseph's 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. We get 70 people that come.
Okay, sorry, you mentioned Dinah a little bit ago, and it got me thinking, did she ever get remarried and have kids or anything like that? No record?
We don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not mentioned. Yeah, we don't know. So think about that. Now, when we leave Egypt in 400 years, how big is the nation going to be? We're like 1.5 to 3 million people are going to walk out of Egypt. So, did God do what God said he was going to do? Does he make them a great nation? Absolutely, right? Is it under really tough means? Like, yeah, that's how coal turns into a diamond, right? Pressure and difficulty, and you're going to see God's going to accomplish his will through really hard means. What?
I was like, how did that happen? And Todd's like, a guy and a girl.
Yeah. Hunter, you've been talking to after class.
Different class.
Yeah, that's different class. I've heard you've had some struggles this week with some of those things.
Wait, what?
Shay and I were talking yesterday.
serious?
Yeah,
About that
about
question?
circumcision and your yeah. He's like, Hunter, please don't make me draw this on the board or whatever.
I didn't ask. Oh my God. He really drew it out. He really had fun with that. God, man, that's Shay's bad. Tell him I said that.
It's all good,
No,
bro.
but,
It's
like,
all good.
I'm serious. Like, how do you get... Not about that.
Want to talk more about circumcision?
No, 400 years, 70 people becomes... And you look
It's
through
nuts.
the lineage, there's only like 3-4 generations.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
everyone had like
Yeah.
30 kids or something.
Yeah.
It's like, what? So, anyway, that was my question.
They had a lot of spare time.
Okay.
They have a lot of
Zing.
wives. They have a lot of wives, yes.
that didn't hurt either. Yeah. So, but that's fascinating just to think about, right? We're starting with 70 family members, and we're going to leave with 1.5 million at the minimum, upwards of 3 million people, depending on how many kids and that sort of thing. So it's mind-boggling. We're talking 3 or 4 generations, how many folks we're going to leave with. So
Tell us the 1.5 to 3 million
we'll get there next, or in numbers.
numbers.
I'm trying to remember where the number is. We're going to get it's several points. But yeah, I will highlight it when we get there.
I remember them.
Yeah, we'll get there. All right, so 7 to begin with. Now, verse 28, he sent Judah, this is Joseph now, or Jacob rather, before him to Joseph to point out the way, before him to Goshen, and they came to the land of Goshen. Now, why Judah, verse 28? He's a leader, right? 28, the 4th-born son, but he is indeed the leader. Joseph prepared his chariot, went to Goshen to meet with his father Israel, and as soon as he appeared before him, he fell on his neck and wept on his neck a long time. Can you imagine father and son for the first time in decades? The last time Joseph saw his father was when he was 17 years old. And we have seen almost a couple decades pass at this point. I mean, it is amazing to see this reuniting between father and son, right? Israel said to Joseph, "Now let me die, since I have seen your face and you are still alive. My life is complete. I can die right now and be a happy man," right? This is amazing, okay? Verse 31, somebody keep rolling there.
Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, "I will go up and tell Pharaoh, and you will say to him, 'My brothers and my father's household, who were in the land of Canaan, have come to me.
All right, so I'm going to go tell Pharaoh on your behalf that you guys are here. Now, when you talk to him, when you guys meet him, this is what I want you to tell Pharaoh. This is odd, right? Pharaoh's going to ask you in verse 33, what's your occupation? What's your job? Brett, in 34, this is what he advises them to say.
You shall say, your servants have been keepers of livestock from our youth, even until now, both we and our fathers, that you may live in the land of Goshen. For every shepherd is loathsome to the Egyptians.
So what's his counsel in verse 34?
Tell the truth.
Partly. So what is their occupation? They're shepherds, right? They sheep, goats, cattle, obviously as well, but primarily sheeps and goats, right? Now, sheep and goats. Sheeps, hippopotamuses. So Joseph says, hey, don't emphasize this fact that you're shepherds. Emphasize the fact that you're what? Keepers of livestock, cattle, right? Why? Because Egyptians thought what of shepherds? They're detestable, right? So don't highlight that when you talk to them, right? I'm not asking you to lie. Just tell him you keep cattle, right? That's the idea. So Joseph went, told Pharaoh, verse 1, chapter 47, my father and my brothers and their flocks and their herds and all that they have come to the land of Goshen, from the land of Canaan into the land of Goshen. He took 5 men from among his brothers, presented them to Pharaoh. So 5 of his brothers. Verse 3, Pharaoh said to his brothers, what is your occupation? Like, how well does Joseph know Pharaoh? He's going to ask you this. And sure enough, first question out of his mouth, hi, nice to meet you. What's your occupation, right? That's, by the way, that's how men interact. What do you do, right? It's unfortunate, but that's kind of our go-to, like, somehow work defines us, or that's who we are. Like, that's not necessarily how women interact with one another. What do you do for a living? But that's how guys introduce themselves, and then we kind of, like dogs, establish a pecking order between who's the biggest and most important or whatever, right? Is your job important? I don't know. So, what's your occupation? And they said to Pharaoh, finish in verse 3. What? Both we and our fathers, right? We're shepherds. My dad was a shepherd. My dad's a shepherd. We've always been shepherds. Like, man, you guys are ding-dongs, right? Just, I don't know. So, whether that's a violation of what Joseph just told them to say, they certainly don't say, hey, we're keepers of livestock. They say we're shepherds. So Pharaoh doesn't wig out, whatever, but it's an odd deal that's included, that these guys don't choose to necessarily heed the advice of Joseph, or they just keep it simple and say, hey, we're shepherds, and move on, okay? Now, they are very humble. Verse 4, we have come to sojourn in the land. There is no pasture for your servants' flocks, for the famine is severe in the land of Canaan. Now, therefore, please let your servants live in the land of Goshen. Pharaoh, we're here. We're at your mercy. Joseph mentioned the land of Goshen. Boy, we got nothing. That would be awesome if we could live there.
What would the difference be in saying I'm in charge, I take care of livestock and I'm a shepherd?
Cattle were more highly revered in Israel, or in Egypt than sheep. So, I'm a banker. I'm a porta potty cleaner. It's like, okay, like. One of those comes with some stench. So that's apparently how they saw it. So verse 5, watch what Pharaoh does. This is, again, on the heels of who Joseph is and their relationship. Listen to this in verse 5.
Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is at your disposal. Settle your
You can do it. Come on, you got this. Come on, Aubrey.
Settle your father and your brothers in the best of the land. Let them live in the land of Goshen. And if you know any capable men among them, then put them in charge of my livestock.
So he gives them Goshen, live in the land. At the end of verse 6, what else do they get blessed with? If you know any capable men, put them in charge of my livestock. You're now going to be keepers of my livestock. Your job will be to shepherd Pharaoh's sheep. So now they've got job security. Pharaoh's got sheep. He needs them taken care of. He didn't want to do it. So, hey, if like you guys have been doing this for like 3 generations, then you take care of all my sheep. Now, keep that in the back of your mind. Joseph's going to take note of that, okay? So you're going to be in charge of all of my livestock. So Pharaoh takes care of them, blesses them. Now, think about this as well. Why would Joseph want to separate his family from the rest of Egypt? Why didn't he just put them in Memphis or Ramses? Well, they are in kind of Ramses. Why wouldn't he put them smack dab in the middle of Egypt in their culture?
So they don't just like lose their themselves.
Yeah.
They just become Egyptian.
There's a sense that he wants them separate from their traditions, their religion, their worship, their practices, so they can have a sense of family and values, right? As you see even different cultures that move into Fresno, right? The Hmong culture, for instance, is very family-centric, and they will tend to live together, right, to maintain their heritage and their values. And those are honorable things, right? Now, he doesn't want them to not interact with the Egyptians, but he certainly wants them to have a sense of what is obviously the most important thing of all that. Yeah, their faith. Like, we worship a different God. Egypt does not honor or worship our God, and Joseph's very well aware of that. So, boy, that's going to be a struggle, and we're going to see that back and forth as Exodus unfolds. But he's certainly looking out for them to say, hey, let's maintain our identity as Hebrews and Israelites and worshipers of Yahweh, because that's very unique to who we are. We are people of the covenant. So I think he is very strategic in putting them in a land that is, number one, it's awesome. This is a great land. This isn't like go live in, Barstow. It's a nice part of the land. Sorry if you guys are from Barstow. So that's the armpit area of California, as we say. I'm teasing, but that's the idea. So they're in a sweet spot, but separate. Okay. Now this is really cool in verse 7. Joseph brought his father Jacob and presented him to Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. How cool is that? So Pharaoh obviously is the one in power, right? But Jacob is the older, and he gives a blessing to Pharaoh, right? Similar to the blessings that we would see at the end of that we're going to see in chapter 49 and the patriarchs. Like, this is probably a prayer or some type of verbal blessing that would be on the head of Pharaoh because of the graciousness that they have been shown, right? Now, by the way, this is the last Pharaoh that's going to be this favorable, but you see a very different disposition in this Pharaoh because of Joseph and his relationship with the rest of the Israelites and the family. Okay, the ones that are to come are going to handle them very much differently, right? So Jacob now blesses Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How many years have you lived?" Verse 9, continue there, and let's watch this conversation that these two patriarchs of their families, if you will, are going to have. Verse 9.
So Jacob said to Pharaoh, "The years of my sojourning are 130. Few and unpleasant have been the years of my life, nor have they attained the years that my fathers lived during the days of their sojourning."
All right, we're going to find out Jacob right now is about 130. He's going to die in about 17 years, at 147. Abraham lived to 175. Isaac lived to 180. So his days are not as long. And we're seeing that lifespan continue to decrease. So by the time we get to the end of Genesis, it's going to be pretty close to normal in our term. Why would he say that my years have been unpleasant?
You got 4 wives, too many kids to bear,
Yes, good.
He had to live with
That's 3 too many. Good, we're clear on that, okay?
He had to live with heartbreak because he didn't have his favorite son.
Yeah, right. Rachel died. His favorite son is dead. I mean, anytime a parent lives longer than their kids, I mean, that should not happen. That just should not happen. So this is it's awful that he's had to do that. So he's saying, man, I've lived the last couple decades of my life in heartache. Right, one of my kids died, and it happens to be my favorite. So he said, it's been hard. Jacob blessed Pharaoh again in verse 10, went out from his presence. Joseph settled his father, verse 11, and his brothers, and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had ordained, or had ordered, verse 11. So Ramses is another name for the portion of the land that they're in, probably added later. That doesn't come till later pharaohs, probably inserted to help understand the geography of where they're going to be, okay? Verse 12, Joseph provided his father and his brothers with all the father's household with food according to the little ones. Verse 13, now there was no food in all the land, right? Because of the famine. It was very severe, but Joseph's family is eating and eating well, right? So they're not suffering as a result of this famine, which again is why Joseph brought them here. Now, verse 14, this is now year 2 or 3 of this famine. Watch how Joseph administrates this season. Verse 14.
Joseph gathered all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan for the grain which they bought And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house.
All right, so this is in the first 2 or 3 years of the famine. The people in the land had spent all of their money to buy grain. But we still have 4 or 5 years of famine left. What do you do? Okay, now if you're Pharaoh, is this a good situation for you? Yes, you own all of the money in the land. Okay, now if you're an Egyptian, this is not good. Okay, when all the money, verse 15, was spent in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, "Give us food. Why should we die in your presence? For our money is gone." Joseph, we're out of money. We paid you. We're out. Everybody in the land is out of money. Please give us food. Verse 16, we're going to find now a new form of payment.
Then Joseph said, "Give up your livestock, and I will give you food for your livestock, since your money is gone."
Why livestock? Because his brothers get to be in charge of all of it. So now they have job security, right? So we are out of dollars. You may not pay me in sheep. You may pay me in goats, and we will exchange now sheep or goats or whatever livestock you have for food. So they brought their livestock, verse 17, to Joseph, and Joseph gave them food in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the herds, the donkeys, and fed them with food in exchange for all their livestock that year. So how long does that deal last? A year. So we're getting to the tail end of the famine, but we still have 2 or 3 years of famine left, and now we're out of money and we're out of our livestock. So if you're an individual in Egypt, what else do you have? You got your land, you got your house, right, that you live in, you got your family, so you got people, right? You've got people and you've got property at this point. That's all you have left, okay? Verse 18, keep reading.
When that year was ended, they came to him the next year and said to him, "We will not hide from my lord that our money is all spent, and the cattle are my lord's. There is nothing left for my lord except our bodies and our land."
That's it. That's all we got. We're not going to hide it from you. We've spent our savings. We have no more cattle. We got nothing. Keep rolling.
Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for food, and we and our land will be slaves to Pharaoh. So give us seed that we may live and not die, and that the land may not be desolate.
Wow. So what is their recommendation to Joseph? We will sell ourselves to you and our land.
For 7 years, Pharaoh had been taking a fifth from them. And so they're just cool with this. Like, they don't revolt. They don't be like, wait,
Yeah.
like, hold up. Like, we should get some free stuff here.
Yeah. It's actually the exact opposite. They love Joseph because they realize we don't have the ability or the foresight, whatever it may have been, or both, to store the necessary amount of food to survive. So they literally see Joseph as their savior, and they are grateful that they get to live, and they're happy to give their money, their cattle, their land, and themselves to them. So, and you're going to see they exact a tax here coming. There's another fifth that's taken, is kind of the portion of of how this is all going to work. So Joseph's the guy that starts income tax, so you can hate on him, but he's right here. 20% of all that they grow goes now to, or not even grow, any of the produce of their land goes to the government, if you will. So that's a good question. I don't know how widespread that knowledge would have been. So for sure Joseph and Pharaoh. Outside of that, I don't know.
Because the people that are offering all these things, I mean, at some point.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, like, if they knew, like, we only had to go one more year, or like,
Yeah,
they would have
we
to
could
be
make it.
expected.
Yeah, but they've got multiple more years left, and there's no end in sight, and they're out of everything. So yeah, whether or not that information was shared, I don't know. Now, by the way, you're going to see that they sell themselves as slaves. As you look through the rest of Egyptian history, you don't see obviously this nation enslaved to Pharaoh, right? That's what Israel's going to be, unfortunately. So there is a sense that they're in bondage or servitude, but it doesn't seem to be this permanent thing that continues in the land. So, but they ask for food. They're out of everything. So they say, hey, take our bodies, take our lands. Why should we lie desolate before your eyes? Buy us our land and our food, that we will be slaves to Pharaoh. Give us seed that we can live. Verse 20, Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. So Pharaoh owns all the money. He owns all the food supply, right? He owns all the sheep, cattle, livestock, herds, all of it. And now what else does he own? All of the land of Egypt, except for, it says later on, the priesthood. So he's like, you guys are spiritual, whatever, you can have your own land. But he takes the land from everybody else. So they deed over, if you will, their land now to Pharaoh. Everyone in Egypt, verse 20, sold his field because the famine was severe upon them, and the land became Pharaoh's. Now, that's insane. So you get to live there, but you don't own the land that you live on, right? So you deeded over the land. I'll let you stay there, but as a result, 20% of anything you make off that land, I get. So you keep 80, I take 20. That's the deal. By the way, this is how Israel is today. You talk to Ronan, our guide over in Israel. He owns a house on land, but he does not own the land. They deed them the land for 99 years, his family. But at the end of that 99 years, they may or may not renew that lease. But the idea of just the land being so valuable and such a commodity in Israel that the government owns all the land. So you buy the house, you pay for the house, you pay for the plumbing. If it breaks, you fix it. And the lease on the land is for 99 years. And you hope that they continue it. So, yeah, right.
Does Jacob's family still own their land? Or like they still thrive on their livestock?
No, in Egypt?
Yeah.
No, they're sojourners. So they're basically leasing the land as well. So they're giving it to them. They're not paying for it.
They're like better off because they're given all the livestock.
Way better off. So these guys are kind of living high on the hog, while the rest of Egypt is literally having to sell their cattle, sell their stuff, out of money. And here, God is protecting this group of 70 living in Goshen. They got a place to live. They got livestock. They've got food that Pharaoh's dishing off his table. He's just, here's the portion for the kids' table, right? You guys are going to eat. So such a contrast, right, of in the story, right? In a generation, we're going to see that flipped. It's going to be obviously Jacob and his family that are going to suffer, and the Egyptians that are going to be living high on the hog at the expense of now the Israelites. So, okay. Verse 21, now after Pharaoh has purchased all the land, read that. This is a kind of a difficult verse to interpret.
As for the people, he removed them to the cities from one end of Egypt's border to the other.
Okay, it says that he removed them from the cities. Anybody got to the cities, sorry. From one end of Egypt's border to the other. Anybody got a different reading of that verse? Yeah, that's probably a better interpretation. He made slaves of them. So literally, he spread out his people, his workforce, to make them kind of work now the land. That's kind of the idea. So for this season, while they're in the famine, he's exacting kind of leadership over them and forcing them into labor. So they're working on his behalf for food. Okay, verse 22, we see again the land. The priests weren't required to give up their land. Yeah.
Okay, so if there's a famine and there's this livestock and people are working the land, like, are we having like crops growing and all of that stuff for them to work the land, or like, because I don't really picture it like being fruitful at all like that.
Yeah. Well, think about it. The famine's going to last 7 years, so at some point prior to that, you've got to till the land, you've got to plow, you got to do that, but you're not going to see the fruit of that for a season or two to come. So this seems to be like the tail end of that, where they're prepping for the end of the famine, but God hasn't brought the rains and it hasn't been a harvest yet. So that's still
Okay, they're still prepping the land. So they're working, but it's not like they have anything to harvest.
correct. Yeah, not yet. Yeah, not till the end of this is over. But but we know that's coming. Yeah.
Do you know if the livestock are eating off this reserve?
I would guess so. Yeah, they're probably that's a food source. Yep. So I don't know how that worked, but Joseph's family was in charge of all that, right? Doling out, don't eat too many so they can reproduce. I don't know how that worked, but they were in charge of that. Okay. So verse 23, Joseph said to the people, "Behold, I have today bought you and your land for Pharaoh. Now here's the seed for you. You may sow the land." So now they're beginning to see the end is coming, right? And maybe Joseph's communicated that to them. I don't know. But he basically says in verse 24, there's a harvest coming, and at the harvest you shall give a fifth to Pharaoh. 4/5, 80% shall be yours for seed of the field, for food, and for those of your households. But you are going to give 20% to me. Now, 25, this is the attitude that the people have towards Joseph. This is fascinating to me. Hunter, read that.
Oh, shoot. So they said, you have saved our lives. Let us find favor in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's slaves.
How crazy is that?
Man.
What's their attitude towards Joseph? Bro, we'd all be dead without you. We love you. Thank you. We are happy to sell our stuff, our land, ourselves. Like, doesn't that seem like a strange attitude? But in a lot of ways, you're like, yeah, that's true. You'd all be dead. This nation and the rest of the known earth at this time would all be dead had it not been for God revealing to Joseph a dream of what was going to occur, him having the foresight and a leader above him that gave him the freedom to say, okay, well, we better save, we better think about these first 7 years so that we can prepare for the second 7 years. They're grateful. So maybe as backwards as that seems to us, I think that's actually the proper attitude. Thank you. You've gotten us through this hard time. Now, did you make Pharaoh stupid rich in the process? Yeah. Does he own everything? Absolutely. But that's his job. He works for Pharaoh. And there's a part of that I'm like, golly, Joseph, like, man, you're kind of working your people pretty hard. But in all of it, they love him. So there's this crazy balance of, they don't see him as some irate dictator. He is a generous, magnanimous, giving individual. And is it all for free? No, it doesn't work that way. There aren't handouts, right? You're going to pay the piper at some point, but they love him in the midst of it.
Could have been to like maybe that they, just with Egypt's gods and everything, like Pharaoh was a god, and like they kind of had that perspective.
Yeah,
I don't know.
possibly. But they said to him, you have saved our lives. Like, this is Joseph. You're a foreigner. And they see what he's done as a great thing. So, and again, at the end of it all, the Egyptians are free. They're going to live on rented land. But had it not been for Joseph, they realized they'd all be dead. And I think that supersedes everything else in the process. So Joseph made it a statute. Here it is, verse 26, the land of Egypt, that Pharaoh would have the fifth, and only the priest did not come before Pharaoh's to have to pay the tax. So there you go. 26 is your first income tax, signed, sealed, and delivered for the future of all of us. Thank you very much, Joseph. So Israel lived in the land of Egypt and Goshen, and they acquired property in it, became fruitful, and became very numerous. So while the nation of Egypt is struggling, God is growing the nation of Israel. We're seeing them become fruitful and prosperous. They're expanding in their living area, acquiring land, if you will. Again, I don't think they own this, but they have certainly a foothold in the land. Okay, Jacob lived in the land for 17 years, so the length of Jacob's life was 147 years. So he's getting ready now to die. Okay, now 49, here are the instructions coming from the patriarch of the family, verse 29. Bless you.
When the time for Israel to die drew near, he called his son Joseph and said to him, please, if I have found favor in your sight, place now your hand under my thigh and deal with me in kindness and faithfulness. Please do not bury me in Egypt.
All right, so we've seen this like level of covenant before, right? Abraham and Eleazar, the significance of that. Like, this is an I'm not screwing around covenant. Like, I'm serious. Do not bury me in this land. Swear by me that when I lie down, verse 30, with my fathers, you shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place. And he said, I will do as you've said. I want to go home. I want to go be buried in the cave of Machpelah, and we're going to see the details of that literally spelled out, okay? Joseph says, I'll do it, and he said, swear to me. So he swore to him in verse 31. Israel bowed and worshipped at the head of the bed in verse 31. Okay, now 48, we're going to see now the blessing begin to get spread out. Verse 48, or chapter 48, it's going to be to Joseph and his kids. And then 49, we're going to see the entire family, all of Joseph's kids, Jacob's kids, get their kind of last rites from their father, if you will. And in chapter 50, we're going to shut down the book of Genesis. So let's keep rolling. 48 now, we're going to see Joseph's two kids blessed by their grandfather, Jacob. Okay, 48:1. Let's pick up there.
Now it came about after these things that Joseph was told, behold, your father is sick. So he took his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, with him. When it was told to Jacob, behold, your son Joseph has come to you, Israel collected his strength and sat up in the bed.
All right, so he's literally on his deathbed, and now he's going to bless the 2 sons of Joseph. Now remember, the idea was Joseph doesn't get the blessing. It's actually his 2 sons that are going to get the blessing. They are literally going to be the double portion. So instead of blessing one in Joseph, the blessing will be extended now to his sons, and he's going to get Ephraim and Manasseh blessed as well, or Manasseh and Ephraim in terms of their birth order. Okay, so let's see how this plays out. Keep reading, Hunter, in verse 3.
Then Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me. Is Luz Bethel?
Yes, correct.
And he said to me, behold, I will make you fruitful and numerous, and will make you a company of peoples, and will give this land to your descendants after you for an everlasting possession. Now your 2 sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, as Reuben and Simeon are.
So these kids, I'm going to treat as if they're not my grandkids, but they're actually my kids. They're mine. So mine in terms of the inheritance and the blessing. So this is a blessing. He's not like stealing his kids. This is a good thing. Okay. In 1 Chronicles, if you guys have like any side notes, 1 Chronicles chapter 5 talks about this. That basically, in place of Reuben, the double portion of the blessing went to Ephraim and Manasseh. Now Judah is still the recognized leader, but the double portion of the blessing goes through Joseph to his sons, okay? Your offspring, verse 6, that are born after you, they're going to be yours, but these 2 kids are mine. Verse 7, now as for me, when I came from Padan, Rachel died, buried her in the land of, it says in Ephrath, that's Bethlehem. I buried her there. That is not where I want to be buried. So when Israel saw Jacob's sons, he said, who are these? This is the first time he's laid eyes now on Joseph's kids, his grandsons. Joseph said in verse 9, these are my sons whom God has given me. So he said, bring them here to me, please, that I may bless them. Now the eyes of Israel were dim, so that the age could not be seen. So at that age you could not see that Joseph brought him close to him, kissed him, and embraced them. Israel said to Joseph, I never expected to see your face, and behold, God has let me see your children as well. I mean, you talk about a guy that's going to die fat and happy, if you will. Like, I get to see now my grandsons of the son that I thought was dead. It's a good day.
So they lived there for 17 years, and he's
That's what I was thinking. Like,
Yeah.
I think C in the idea that he can't see. Yeah, but there's some idea that this is a new, he needs to be introduced to them, and I think it's because of his eyesight. So maybe not first time. That's probably I probably misspoke there. So there you go. But now that is on his deathbed, he can't recognize them, and that's going to play into this story, is to that he can't see physically these 2 sons. Okay, Israel said to Joseph, 11 we already did. 12, Joseph took them from his knees and bowed down with his face to the ground. Joseph took them both. Ephraim was on his right hand toward Israel's left, and Manasseh with his left hand towards Israel's right, and he brought them close to him. So the 2 sons are bowing in front of their grandfather, right? And it says, just to get our stories straight here, the right hand towards, Ephraim at his right towards Israel's left, so Ephraim would have been on his left hand, and Manasseh on his right, okay? So with his right hand. Now, verse 14, when he is going to reach out and bless these 2 kids, verse 14, watch what he does.
But Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, crossing his hands, although Manasseh was the firstborn.
So Manasseh was over here, Ephraim was over here, the younger, and he goes like this. And he puts the blessing of the firstborn, that was supposed to be Manasseh, on Ephraim. Okay, so what are we seeing again in this family? There's a sense of favoritism, but this is legit. God has revealed this to him. In the same way, when Jacob was in the womb 147 years ago, and God appears and says the older, Esau, will serve the younger. God had ordained this. Joseph kind of wigs out in this moment and says, hey, Dad, what the heck are you doing, right? Your hands are wrong. He says, no, relax. God has shown me this. So he switches his hands and now blesses the younger with the blessing of the firstborn. So Manasseh gets the firstborn's blessing, okay? Israel stretched out his hand, verse 14, laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger. Sorry, Ephraim gets the blessing. In the left hand on Manasseh, the older. And he said now, although Manasseh was the firstborn, verse 15, he blessed Joseph and said, the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life to this day, the angels who have redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and may the name live on in them, and may the names of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, may they grow into a multitude on the midst of the earth. So this is like a blessing for both of them. So no harm, no foul yet. Okay? When Joseph saw, verse 17 rather, that his father had laid his right hand on Ephraim's head, it displeased him, and he grasped his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to put it on Manasseh. So he's trying to switch now this back to this to get the blessing to the oldest, the firstborn, correctly. And Joseph said to his father, no, 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 my father, not so. For the one, this one is your firstborn. Place your right hand on his head. But the father refused. His father refused, verse 19, and said, I know, my son, I know. He shall also become a great people, and he shall be great. However, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations. He blessed them that day and said, by you, Israel, shall pronounce blessing, saying, may God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. Thus he put Ephraim before Manasseh. And Joseph, once this is communicated, seems to go, okay. Like, if that's what God has revealed to you, this isn't playing favorites. I get this. This is the same that occurred prior to your birth as to what you're doing with my two kids. This is from the Lord. Israel said to Joseph, behold, I'm about to die. In verse 21, God will be with you and bring you back into the land of your fathers. I will give you one portion more than your brothers, which I took from the land of the Amorite with my sword and with my bow. So I'm going to give you land in Canaan. There is no tribe of Joseph. There's a tribe of Ephraim, and there's a tribe of Manasseh. Okay, but you do not see in the land a tribe of Joseph. He's not allotted land. He's allotted a double portion through his sons, and they're the ones that get the glory and honor. And Joseph obviously is great with that. That is a double portion of the blessing to him. Okay?
So are there 13 tribes? Or
Yeah, there's 13 tribes. So with Levi, you get 13. Okay, so that's how you have 12 sons and 13 tribes. So Joseph's turned into 2. Levi gets no land, so there's only 12 areas of land, but 13 brothers that will be included in the allotment of the land. And we'll see how God disperses Levi as we get into the book of Joshua. It's very important as to how that occurs, right? But they get a blessing. They just don't get a land allotment, okay? So now, 49, we've seen previews of this chapter in other places. This is the deathbed. This is the blessing of the father now, knowing he's about to die. He's blessed Joseph's 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and now he's going to bless the rest of his direct descendants.
Kind of not unrelated, but not pertaining to this. Do Jews still trace themselves back to their specific tribe and take a lot of pride in that? And is there any sort of land separation anymore?
Yes, they know where they come from. They take a ton of pride in that, so they can trace their lineage back. That's a big deal, but there is no longer land division. Today, it's more of kind of like it is here. Like, where are the nice portions of the land? Okay, those are more expensive, right? And where are the parts that are like the middle of the desert? Nobody wants to live there, so you can live there for cheap. Israel has, in the south, obviously as we've studied the land a little bit, a great portion of the land is desert. Like, nobody wants to live there. So Israel has literally had to figure out, how do we populate this gigantic area that nobody wants to live in? And they've made huge incentives from the government to move down there. And because Israel kind of has this, they're very entrepreneurial in their attitude towards life. They're amazing. The amount of inventions per capita that come out of Israel is higher than any nation in the world. They're amazingly innovative. But they've found ways to live in the desert, to bring water in there. They've incentivized teachers with higher salaries to go live there. They give you, I mean, it's really cool. So, but today it's based on, just like his here, it's capitalism. So.
I thought they couldn't trace their heritage, like specifically because the records of all of those genealogies was destroyed. I think in 80, 70, or wasn't there? Because I read
Yeah.
somewhere that, for example, the priesthood.
Right.
They're hoping at some point to have the temple rebuilt.
Yeah.
But they can't actually, with any kind of definitive sense, they can't point to a group of people who can even serve in that way.
Right.
Because they've lost those records.
In a sense, yes. I don't know how thorough it is, but there's definitely a sense that you are connected to your forefathers, and you know, kind of, I think, for the most part, what tribes you come from. That's my understanding in talking to Ronan. So literally, our guide in Israel, his name is Ronan ben Moshe. Ben means son, and Moshe is Moses. It's how you say Moses. So his last name is son of Moses. And it doesn't mean Moses. It means his father's name was Moses. So that's their last name, and it's odd how they got that. But that's a sense of, like, as you see people introduced throughout the Old Testament, it's, I'm Saul. Saul who? I'm Saul, son of Kish. Oh, you're that Saul. Got it. So that's basically how Ronan's dad got his last name. They changed it when they moved back into the land in 48. But there's certainly a sense of, you're not who you are on your own. You're who you are in relation to your family and your father and your father's father. So that genealogy is much stronger and well known. Now, to your point, that absolutely is probably correct in the sense that they don't have definitive answers, because that was thousands of years ago for them. But that family connection is huge in Israel, as are the importance of names, right? They give you every day in Israel, you read a Torah portion, a piece of the scroll, and it's given, like we have a Bible reading plan here, so you'd open up your Bible and you would read 1 Corinthians 7 or whatever it was that day that was just in your reading plan. They have the same thing in Israel, in a sense, in the Old Testament, or the Torah. And a lot of obedient Jews will name their kids on the day they were born out of whatever Torah portion they were given. So Ronan's was, I forget where it was, but there was a couple names that were mentioned in that chapter of Israelites. So that was his menu, right? So his kid's name is Itamar. And I'll tell you why his name's Itamar, who that comes from later. But that's again, just that importance of names and genealogies in their view even today.
How do the names work when they get married or whatever? Do they still have to keep like a certain heritage
Yeah.
of
That's a good question.
from, or do you know how that works?
I think they take on the name of the husband, just like they do here, like we would. Like you would
So
take the
they
name
would
of.
kind of give up their father's lineage or whatever.
Yeah, you're grafted into kind of a new family through your husband. Yeah. So, Ronan's wife is, what's her name? I'm brain farting, but yeah, her last name is Ben Moshe. So just like Ronan's. So yeah, I think it's correct. Yeah. So, okay. So speaking of the blessings of the Father and the genealogies, 49. Let's kind of read through this again, though we've seen some of it. We're going to read the entire blessings now given to the sons of Jacob. Okay, 49:1.
Then Jacob summoned his sons and said, Assemble yourselves that I may tell you what will befall to you in the days to come. Gather together and hear, O sons of Jacob, and listen to Israel your father.
All right, number 1, firstborn. Verse 3, Reuben.
Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might and the beginning of my strength, preeminent in dignity and preeminent in power. Uncontrolled as water, you shall not have preeminence, because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch.
All right. You guys remember that story, right? Slept with his father's concubine, said, Dad, I want you dead. I'm the new, man in the family. And unfortunately, that event has haunted Reuben for the rest of his life. So he is not going to receive the blessing of the firstborn. Unfortunately, it's preeminent in dignity, preeminent in power. Man, you had so much potential, but you blew it, right? You could not be patient and wait. And that's kind of going to be your heritage, unfortunately. So still gets a blessing. He's going to get land. He gets some stuff, but not the full blessing that he could have received, okay? Simeon and Levi, our brothers, their swords are implements of violence. Let not my soul enter into their council. Let not my glory be united with their assembly. Because in their anger they slew men, and in their self-will they lamed oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce. Their wrath is cruel. And I will disperse them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Now, what is that referring to? Yeah, Genesis 34, when after their sister Dinah was raped, they went into the land, killed Shechem, killed Hamor, and they killed every other male there. They went crazy and said, man, your wrath is cruel. That was not from the Lord. You went overboard, okay? At the end, you see a hint of what's going to come with one of the tribes. I will disperse them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. Who are we referring to here? Levi. How does Levi get dispersed in Israel? Doesn't get land. They get 48 cities all over Israel. And 6 of those cities, 3 on each side of the Jordan, are going to be more significant than the rest. But instead of putting them in a pocket, God takes them like salt and just scatters them throughout the land. So now you've got Levites living all throughout the land. So this blessing, or this curse rather, ultimately is going to be a blessing for Israel, because now they're going to have the priesthood scattered throughout the land. And the priest's job is to take God and to take man and to intercede on their behalf and bring them together. And they're going to have now representatives all over the land to do that. So God is going to use this for a blessing. Okay? Now, verse 8, number 4, Judah, the fourth-born kid, the leader, here is his blessing.
Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's son shall bow down to you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He couches, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion who dares rouse him up.
Man, how does that sound? You're the king of the jungle. Ain't nobody messing with you. You're the top of the food chain. Your brothers will bow down to you. You're going to put your hand on the neck of your enemies. You are in full control. So the idea is, man, you are preeminent. You are what Reuben should have been. You are the leader of the family. You are going to be blessed. Now in verse 10, this is a really cool nugget here. Somebody read that who's got an NASB.
The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of all the peoples.
All right, now somebody's got I think NIV translates this. This is a really hard verse to understand what we're talking about, and there's a lot of interpretive decisions, and the NASB just takes one extreme. Who's got a very different reading of that? I think NIV should. Just calling them out. Everybody else is burning their NIV. There you go. We need flavor. It's like salt. Who's got an NIV? Nobody? Okay. There's.
I can do it in my Bible app.
If that's okay. Amanda, what do you got?
She's doing it.
She's hiding.
The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nation shall be his.
All right, so NIV, that's NIV? Takes an even stronger view of this text. Now the question is, what's being talked about here? Let's just kind of work through it. The scepter, what is a scepter? Who holds a scepter? A king. It's the ruling staff of a king. The scepter shall not depart from Judah. So if you're going to be king in Israel, what line has the kingly staff? Judah. Okay, so if you're going to be king in Israel, you got to come from Judah. Now, the first kings of Israel, Saul, what tribe was he from? Benjamin. Okay, now God says, hey, you want a king? Pick. Israel, who do you want? They pick Saul. They pick Saul, we're going to find out, because he's Fabio, he's got 22-inch biceps, he's got long hair, he's 6'4", he's good looking. Women would have swooned for him when he walked. I mean, that's who Saul is, right? And how was Saul's king? He's pretty much a failure. He started great, he had great potential, and blew it. Now, God steps in after that and says, I'm going to pick a king. And who does God pick? He picks David from what tribe? Judah. And that promise that we saw as we talked way early on in the book of Genesis, the Abrahamic covenant with the land and the seed and the blessing, that seed portion, the promise of a future king to come, was given again to David, that from your line, the throne will never be empty. You're going to have an eternal throne from Judah, right? So Judah is going to be the one that's going to have this kingly line from it. That much is clear, okay? Nor the ruler's staff from between his feet. This is just a way of saying the scepter shall not depart from Judah, and they say it again in a different way in part B of verse 10, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet. Now here's the part that's confusing. Until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of all the peoples. Now, Shiloh in verse 10 in my version is capitalized, right? It's viewed here as messianic, meaning that the scepter shall not depart from the line of Judah until peace comes, right? He who brings peace. Now, obviously looking in the rearview mirror from this, who do we believe that to be? The ultimate king from the line of Judah is Jesus Christ. Now, Amanda, your version says, or NIV says, until to him whom it belongs. So is this talking about just Judah in general and the kings that are going to come from them, right? We're going to have a nation that's going to split, Israel to the north, Judah to the south. Is it those, that the ending of that kingdom? Is this messianic? The hard part is nowhere else in Scripture do we see Shiloh, that word peace, as a messianic title. We don't see prophecies pertaining to Shiloh as meaning for Messiah. We don't know. But it seems like this is it is a right now, like, blessing that, Judah, you have the scepter, and the scepter will not depart from your line. And we know that to be ultimately Jesus. So as we look at the book of Genesis in whole and look at two significant prophecies of the coming of a singular male who will be king, in Genesis 3:15, we see the promise of that Redeemer, right? The proto-evangelion, the first gospel, the Redeemer that will come. And it seems like that Redeemer will come from the line of Judah, who will serve as king, as well as Genesis 14, priest.
What do Jewish people do with this passage? Because they don't have a king right now.
Yeah. They're still waiting, yeah. But their Messiah will certainly come from that line. They're just waiting on that Messiah.
So they still think, I guess I'm thinking, like, okay, like the kings are done.
Yeah.
Like, well, what do they do now? Like, there's going to be another king?
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah, another Messiah, not necessarily a king, but they're waiting for their deliverer. So, yeah. I think we talked about this before, but by the way, Jesus was not the first person to rise up and say, I'm him. There were dozens of crazy nut jobs. And some, by the way, who were believed to be able to do miracles and demonstrated those. And people saw them and said, that guy does miracles. Like, Jesus wasn't even the first, according to Jewish tradition, to do miracles to authenticate his message. Like, so there's a lot of people that have risen up and started revolts and all kinds of weird stuff. So it's not like we give Jews a really bad time. Like, dude, how did you miss this? Well, there were dozens, and some even showed up and said, no, I'm actually him, and I demonstrated that, and I'm a good dude, and like, so there is a sense that, we would all hope, but their hearts are hardened, right? According to Romans, you get there.
So do Jewish people still track the line of Judah?
Again, to Luke's point, how thoroughly they can do that, I don't know, but they know that their Messiah will be from that line. So, but that's
Planning it, they would definitely check.
yeah. You're not gonna
Tracking everybody.
You're not gonna say I'm from Naphtali, right? Or I'm from Dan. Like, yeah. So, in fact, it's really funny. We'll get there later. Dan, being a Danite, literally means being a quitter today. So if like someone's like backing out of something early, like don't be a Danite. Like that literally is that's slang in Israel, and I'll show you why when we get into the book of Judges. It's pretty funny. But to this day, that is their slang. Like if you're a quitter, you're a Danite, right? It's rough. So my father's name is Dan, unfortunately. So yeah. So their whole tribe got crushed. Okay. So Judah gets this amazing blessing, okay? Keep rolling to verse 11. We're not done with Judah.
He will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch. He will wash his garments in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes will be darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk.
Now this sounds odd, but why would all these things be mentioned about? I mean, you're going to tie your goat up to a vine. There's going to be choice vines. You're going to wash your garments in wine. What's the picture here? What is wine in Israel? Harvest, grapes, right? It's the idea of abundance. Like there's going to be so much, right? His robes in the blood of grapes. Like you have so much wine that you don't even wash your stuff in water. You're going to be dull from wine, his teeth white from milk. Like there's going to be such abundance in Judah, such blessing. It's like you're going to throw away the $1 bills. You don't even count those, right? There's such blessing to you, if you will. Okay. We won't read through necessarily all of the other tribes. I'll kind of highlight a couple for you. They're all mentioned in here. Zebulun, verse 13, shall dwell by the seashore. They're going to be a haven for ships, so they're close to the coast. They're not actually on the coast, but close. Verse 14, Issachar is mentioned, strong like donkey. That's from Shrek, so there you go. They got it from there. Verse 16, Dan shall judge his people. As one of the tribes of Israel, Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a horned snake in the path that bites the horse's heels, that its riders fall backwards, right? You're going to judge your people. Dan literally means to judge, but you're going to be marked by kind of irreverence and violence and biting the horse's heel and like this kind of a rough picture for you, and we're going to see what becomes of them. By the way, when you read Revelation, I think it's chapter 5, all of the tribes of Israel are mentioned again in the end times, save one. The tribe of Dan is gone mysteriously. They are not mentioned in the book of Revelation. So, and we'll see the culmination of their story again. Joshua's going to go into the land. They're going to allot the land to all these people that Jacob has now predicted. We'll see the allotment of land actually happen after the Exodus again in the book of Joshua, and why that occurs and what Dan does with their land in the book of Judges. Okay, verse 19, you get Gad, 20 Asher, 21 Naphtali, and 22 now we get Joseph. And look at this blessing. Holy cow. 22 all the way through verse 26. Somebody read that.
Joseph is a fruitful
Bow, yeah. Bow here.
a fruitful bow by a spring, its branches run over a wall. The archers bitterly attacked him and shot at him and harassed him, but his bow remained firm, and his arms were agile from the hands of the mighty one of Jacob. From there is the shepherd bestowed Israel.
So obviously a story of Joseph's life. Man, he had it hard, but his bow remained firm and faithful. Keep rolling.
From the God of your father who helps you, and by the Almighty who blesses you, with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breast and the womb, the blessings of your father have surpassed the blessings of my ancestors. Up to the utmost bounds of the everlasting hills may they be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of the head of the one distinguished among his brothers.
What do you hear repeated in that phrase numerous times? Blessings, blessings, blessings. I mean, he just gets his socks blessed off, literally. So the idea is, man, you had it hard, you persevered. At the end of verse 26, you distinguished yourself among your brothers. May you be blessed. High, low, in between, heavens, mountains, sea, from high and low, like everywhere, you're going to be blessed, okay? And then finally, the last brother, 27. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning, he devours his prey, and in the evening, he divides his spoil. Just one verse on Benjamin. What quality do you see mentioned in him? Yeah, he can conquer. He can do battle. In fact, we're going to find out that the Benjamites were ambidextrous, right? They were the ones that could fight with either hand. So you chop off the right hand, no problem. I'll beat you down with my left hand, right? By the way, what tribe was Saul from? Benjamin. This is why they picked him. He was this tribe was known for their ability to do battle. So when Israel wanted a king like the other nations, what did the other nations' kings do? Well, they led their troops into battle. So they wanted a king that looked the part of a king. Put on the armor, look fierce, lead us into battle, go conquer lands, protect our borders and what have you. That they wanted a king just like that. And Benjamin, we're going to see in the book of Judges, was amazing in battle. Okay. Now, let's watch the death now and burial of our boy Jacob. Verse 28, someone keep going there.
All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them when he blessed them. He blessed them every one with a blessing appropriate to him. Then he charged them and said to them, I am about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought along with the field from Ephron the Hittite for a burial site.
All right, so he is crystal clear on where he wants to go when he's buried, right? Take me back there, okay? Buried Abraham, his wife Sarah there, Isaac, Rebekah. He buried Leah there in that field. Verse 33, pick up there, Todd.
When Jacob finished charging his sons, he drew his feet into the bed and breathed his last.
147 years.
Gathered to his people.
Yeah, and he is now the third of our great patriarchs to die. So Abraham, Isaac, and now Jacob, all dead. Joseph in verse 50, verse 1 of chapter 50, fell on his father's face, wept over him and kissed him. Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father, so the physicians embalmed Israel. So gives him an Egyptian burial, if you will, to preserve his body. And we'll finish here with verse 3. Read that.
Now 40 days were required for it, for such is the period required for embalming, and the Egyptians wept for him 70 days.
So 70 days they mourned the death of Jacob, rather. Why 70 days? Anybody got a note on that? When a Pharaoh died in Egypt, you mourned 72 days. So they gave him 70 days of mourning in Egypt. So that tells you the prominence that he held in the eyes of the Egyptians and in the eyes of his family, two less than a Pharaoh. So they mourned for him 70 days, mandatory weeping, meaning you would show that externally and so on and so forth. Okay. Tomorrow we will finish chapter 50. We will do a celebratory dance at the finish of the book of Genesis, and we will start our second book in the book of November, in the month of November, 2 months, and hopefully, Lord willing, we will finish tomorrow. All right. So no promises, but I'm pretty sure we can get through chapter 50 in an hour and a half. So, all right. Blessings to you guys. We will see you at ODark 30 tomorrow.